So my question, or the what lends itself to ambiguity is, it is extremely unlikely that any of the pilots would have done this. Extremely unlikely. Theoretically, the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau should be having access to that, and they should have been able to tell us very clearly as to what was the actual position of the switches in the cockpit at the time at which this transition has taken place. So I was sitting in Vienna when this particular accident had happened. My first thought was disbelief. What could have happened immediately after takeoff which has resulted in a complete loss of thrust? The preliminary report has already come out yesterday from the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau. And it's a 15-page report. It's fairly elaborate, but it is still a preliminary report. What, in my mind, the few points that I have is that, one, it is a bit ambiguous. The language which is used seems to be a little ambiguous as to what actually happened during the final stages of the aircraft after it got airborne till the time that it impacted upon the ground. The language which is lending itself to ambiguity is a statement made about the fuel control switches. Now, I am a Dreamliner pilot. I've flown the Dreamliner for 10 years. I have more than 4,700 odd hours in command on the Dreamliner. So I'm familiar with the machine. I'm familiar with the environment. The fuel control switch is the area of concern at this point in time as per the report. What the report says is that the fuel control switches have transitioned from run to cutoff. Now, whether this means that the physical movement of these fuel control switches has taken place or not is not clear at all. The enhanced and advanced flight data recorder would tell the position of all the switches in the cockpit. So theoretically, the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau should be having access to that, and they should have been able to tell us very clearly as to what was the actual position of the switches in the cockpit at the time at which this transition has taken place. As far as I'm concerned, the pilots would have nothing to do with the fuel control switches during the takeoff. The only time at which the fuel control switches come into play is if, for example, there is an engine failure at or after V1 or at any stage immediately after takeoff, which results, or an engine fire of a single engine, which results in the actions that would be involving the fuel control switch. These actions would only take place at a safe height of at least 400 feet once the aircraft is stabilized and the autopilot is on. So these memory items would involve in what we call securing the engine, which in this case, let's take the case of engine failure, would involve putting the auto throttle arm switch off, identifying the correct thrust lever, confirming it from the other pilot, then bringing the thrust lever from its takeoff position to idle position, and then subsequently putting your hand on the fuel control switch, identifying it, confirming it with the other pilot before putting it from run to cutoff. It's a very deliberate action. It's a very slow action. And the final action would be to pull the fire switch. So all these actions would take place only at or after a minimum safe altitude of 400 feet, certainly not immediately after takeoff. So my question, or the what lends itself to ambiguity is, it is extremely unlikely that any of the pilots would have done this. Extremely unlikely. And that too, you're not talking about one switch, you're talking about both switches. And as per the report, both these switches have transitioned from run to cutoff within a period of 1 second. Now, even if you look at it from a pilot's perspective, if I have to put off a fuel control switch, I'm just saying normally, Even if I do it at maximum speed, from a takeoff position, I will have to first look down, find out where that switch is, put my hand on that switch, lift it up because it's a spring-loaded switch, pick it up, move it to cut off, and thereafterwards release it. Thereafterwards, I will have to follow the same procedure on the other the fuel control switch, in which I have to identify it, pick it up, release the spring-loaded catch, move it to the cutoff position, and then release it again. This entire process certainly cannot be done within a second. So my thinking is, perhaps you have to look at other aspects as to why this fuel control switches have transitioned into a cutoff position. Now, whenever the fuel control switch is put to run, which it is done when we first start the engine on the pushback, this fuel control switch is not touched at all till you switch off at the end of the flight, right? But whenever it is put from idle to run, from cutoff to run, there are certain micro switches within the whole system itself which makes contacts, which control different things. Different signals are sent to the software, to the FADEC, to the systems which open up the fuel control valves of the engine, of the spar fuel control valve. That means the valve which controls the fuel from your fuel tank to that particular engine. There are all different micro switches that are there which make contact when you move the fuel control switch from cutoff to on. Maybe these would have to be investigated in greater detail. I'm sure that the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau has all the necessary expertise. They have access to all the experts, the domain experts, the original equipment manufacturers. I'm sure they'll be able to find out exactly what went wrong. As far as I'm concerned, I think it is extremely, extremely remote that anyone during a process of takeoff takes his attention off the takeoff, looks down, finds the switch, puts it off, and then finds the other switch, again puts it off, and all within a period of 1 second. In my opinion, extremely unlikely.
Also, the Pilot Association are raising the question on the same. They are also saying that it is also being said that the report has been leaked without authorization. What would you like to say on that?
I have no comment on that because I am not aware of what is the procedure by which these reports are leaked, whether it's deliberate, whether it's not deliberate. As I understand, this report has been put up by the AIIB within the stipulated period of time of 30 days. And I think they've done that. Whether a preliminary report, somebody else had access, I would not be able to comment on that.
And on Boeing, what's your reaction on the overall situation? What happened?
My initial thinking is that since, for example, when this particular accident happened, I was sitting in Vienna. I had just taken off from Delhi to Vienna the previous day, and I was waiting in Vienna for the Dreamliner flight from Delhi to Vienna to come, and then we would have taken that flight from Vienna to Washington. So I was sitting in Vienna when this particular accident had happened. My first thought was disbelief. What could have happened immediately after takeoff which has resulted in a complete loss of thrust? Please do remember at that time nobody knew what had happened. So there were different speculations going on, there were different theories going on. Somebody talked about flaps, somebody talked about this, somebody talked about that. Somebody said instead of retracting the gear, he raised the flaps. And all sorts of wild speculations were going on. My thinking is that if the preliminary report had shown something alarming or something dangerous, both the Accident Investigation Board, Bureau of India, the DGCA, again in consultation with Boeing and with the FAA of the US, would have stopped all Dreamliner flights or stopped the combination of Dreamliner flights with this particular brand of engine, which is the GE engine. As you're aware, there are different engine manufacturers, GE, Trent, Rolls-Royce, etc. The fact that they didn't, to us, at that point in time, 1 month before, that is when the accident happened, indicated that maybe it's nothing to do with, it's nothing that is alarming or nothing that is dangerous enough for the regulatory authority to step in and say that it is dangerous to fly, stop flying. So, coming back to your question about what has possibly happened, Now, Boeing is the original equipment manufacturer of the Boeing 787. This aircraft is widely in service all across the world with many airlines. I have flown this aircraft for 10 years. I have found no problem with it. This aircraft has logged more than, I would say, about 4 million flying hours across the world in its 13, 14 odd years of since the time it's been introduced. It's a very advanced aircraft. It's the most advanced aircraft that Boeing has in its fleet. And I'm sure that they have the expertise and they have the knowledge, they have the capability of knowing what is wrong with their equipment or what are the glitches in the equipment. If you put your mind back onto early days, there were certain teething problems that the Dreamliner had, primarily to deal with its lithium-ion batteries about overheating. But that was the initial glitches. It got sorted out. And it's been running without any problems for a fairly long period of time. So I do not think that there is anything dramatic which would have caused either the regulator here in India or the regulator in the US or Boeing or the engine manufacturer to be alarmed and stop flying. So it's up to the authorities to investigate what are the reasons why it's happened. My input to this would be that the flight data recorder has the position of all the switches in the cockpit. What is the position? Is it in run? Is it in cutoff? All this data is available from the DFDR, Enhanced Airborne Flight Data Recorder. So all that they have to check, to my mind, is to say that at the point in time at which this fuel control switch has transitioned from run to cutoff, what was the physical position?
Want access to Business Standards premium insights? Join our exclusive LinkedIn communities and connect with top voices in the BFSI space on topics that matter to you.